General Hospital spoilers tease that in the suffocating darkness of secrets tightening around her soul, Brook Lynn feels like the world is shrinking. Each step pushing her further into a corner with no escape. Old memories, the shame from the past, the fear of loss, and the desperate longing to hold on to her love for Dante are building up into a tremendous pressure, making Brook Lynn feel as though she is carrying a boulder on her chest. Heavy enough to make it impossible to breathe. She knows time is running out. A decision must be made. An action must be taken. And that action, inevitably, leads Brook Lynn to a more dangerous plan than anything she has ever done in her life, to conceal the truth about Gio by switching the DNA test results. At first, the thought was just a fleeting spark in her desperation. But as each day passes, as the fear of losing Dante grows stronger, that spark turns into a raging fire, burning away every ounce of reason and morality that once existed in Brook Lynn. She tells herself this isn't lying, this isn't betrayal, but merely a way to protect her love. To safeguard a future she has fought too long to secure. If the truth comes out, Dante will never look at her with the same trust he has now. She will no longer be the woman he loves. She will only be a stain in his memory. And with all her fear and desperation, Brook Lynn convinces herself that by any means necessary, she cannot let that happen. The plan to swap Joe's DNA results begins as a quiet but determined effort. She reaches out to underground connections, using the shady ties she once swore to avoid. Willing to pay any price to secure the silence and manipulation she needs. Step by step, Brook Lynn crafts a perfect fake story, one where Gio will be proven to have no biological connection to her. A mask is formed from lies, so intricate that even the sharpest eyes would struggle to detect it. But even as the steps of the plan unfold smoothly, Brook Lynn's anxiety never lessens. On the contrary, it grows into a simmering undercurrent, gnawing at her mind relentlessly. Because Brook Lynn knows that even the slightest mistake, even a random coincidence, could make everything crumble. The truth always finds a way to surface, and once it does, it will sweep away all excuses, all actions done in the name of love. The obsession with the possibility of being found out makes Brook Lynn increasingly tense, irritable, and prone to panic. Even the normal glances from those around her now make her jump. And seemingly innocent questions tighten her chest in worry. Dante, with the sharp instincts of a police officer, sometimes looks at her with a questioning gaze, making Brook Lynn feel as though she's standing on trial. Willow, Michael, Chase, all the people close to her also inadvertently become nightmares in the fearful recesses of her mind. Worse, Brook Lynn knows that Gio, though young, has an inherent instinct to seek the truth. If one day that child wonders about his origins and seeks out the answers himself, all of her efforts to hide the truth will be for nothing. And Brook Lynn will not only lose Dante, but also Gio, everything she has risked so much to protect. One of the greatest shocks of Brook Lynn's life is quietly forming in the shadows of her secrets. She understands that if the DNA swap plan fails, the consequences won't just be being hated or ostracized. It will be a complete collapse, the irreplaceable loss of love, honor, family, and ultimately, herself. There will be no one, nowhere, for her to return to. Only a broken, empty Brook Lynn under the weight of the lies she has created. But amidst all the panic, Brook Lynn continues forward, because she knows that if she stops, if she confesses, she will lose Dante immediately. And for Brook Lynn now, even more than life itself, Dante is the one thing she cannot let go of. Regardless of the consequences. Regardless of the bleeding conscience. Regardless of the price to be paid. And so, Brook Lynn continues down the path with no way out, each step taking her deeper into the abyss. A darker, more desperate chapter is unfolding, where each breath carries the weight of fragmented obsessions, and each second that passes brings her closer to the day the truth will be exposed beyond saving. When Lulu and Chase first start to sense something unusual about Gio, they think they might just be overreacting. But as they delve deeper into the hidden fragments of the truth, cross-checking small but incongruous details, they begin to realize that behind Brook Lynn's warm smile lies an ocean of dark secrets swirling beneath the surface. And then, in a moment Brook Lynn could never anticipate, Lulu and Chase piece the clues together and uncover a terrifying truth. Gio is Brook Lynn and Dante's biological child. The result of a past Brook Lynn desperately tried to bury under the cold ice of lies for years. This discovery isn't just a normal shock, it's an explosion that shatters all the fragile foundations of trust Brook Lynn had been trying to rebuild. But the real tragedy begins when Lulu and Chase realize that what they know doesn't align with what's on paper. A DNA test result swap was carried out meticulously to deliberately hide the truth. To keep Gio trapped in a destiny that doesn't belong to him. Brook Lynn, in her blind desperation to protect her love for Dante and her own future, has crossed the thin line between love and betrayal. Dragging everyone into a dangerous game no one can control. The story of truth and betrayal is erupting into an unstoppable maelstrom, sweeping everyone involved into it. One of the latest and largest shocks in all of Port Charles is slowly emerging, one that will not only forever change the lives of Brook Lynn, Dante, and Gio but also send shockwaves through every relationship around them, like fragile leaves in a fierce storm. While Brook Lynn struggles to control the situation, hiding her panic behind a facade of pride and composure, everything around her is slowly cracking with tiny, yet unstoppable, fissures. Lulu, with the heart of a mother who has lost and a sharp intuition honed by pain, cannot accept that an innocent child like Gio has been pulled into such a complex web of lies. Chase, with his absolute loyalty to truth and justice, feels it is his duty not just to protect Dante but to protect Gio, to protect the truth that the boy deserves to know. And as the truth starts to surface piece by piece, not only Brook Lynn but even Lois, the mother who always tried to protect Brook Lynn at any cost, is caught in the storm. Lois knew, at least in part, about her daughter's secret. She had remained silent out of love, hoping that if the past were locked away long enough, it would rot and fade away. But now, Lois is faced with the truth that her silence has contributed to this tragedy. And now, she can no longer remain on the sidelines, no longer save Brook Lynn with weak excuses. Amidst the turbulent waves of this crisis, Brook Lynn and Lois must face a harsh reality, either confess everything before someone else exposes it, or let the cruel revelation bury them with no escape. But confessing means losing everything, losing Dante, losing the Quartermain family, losing the respect of the town they once called home. Brook Lynn feels the immense weight of the decision she must make. She recalls every moment with Dante, every smile, every hug, every promise they shared. And her heart bleeds thinking that all of it could disappear with one confession. But then, she remembers Gio, the innocent, lovable child, who shares a part of her blood, and she knows that if she continues the lies, if she drags this tragedy on, she will destroy not only her life but also her son's fragile soul. Out there, Port Charles seems peaceful, as if nothing is happening. But in familiar homes, in hearts breaking apart, in eyes glancing at each other with suspicion, an earthquake is quietly brewing. Ready to explode, plunging all those involved into a battle from which no one can emerge without carrying scars that will never heal. And in the eye of the storm, Brook Lynn, Lois, Dante, Lulu, and Chase will face the bare truth, the truth that cannot be swapped, twisted, or buried under any mask. The truth, one way or another, always finds a way to rise. And when it does, it will show no mercy to anyone. Chase felt like the world was collapsing beneath his feet as the harsh truths began to unfold. Throughout all this time, he had trusted Brook Lynn, who had once been an important part of his life, someone with whom he shared dreams and hopes for a peaceful, simple future. But now, in front of Chase, there was no longer the image of the naive old friend he once knew. There was a completely different Brook Lynn, someone who was willing to conceal, manipulate, and betray everything just to protect the secret she desperately clung to. Chase was shocked not only by what Brook Lynn had done but also by the betrayal from those he had once considered familiar. People he had thought would always stand by the truth. One of the biggest events of his life was unfolding right before his eyes, and he could do nothing to stop it. Brook Lynn's scheme to switch Joe's DNA test results, her willingness to push everyone into a whirlwind of lies rather than admit the truth, had shattered the trust Chase had in her. The nightmare truly began when Brook Lynn continued to deny, continued to reject her blood connection to Gio, even when the truth was undeniable. Each denial felt like a cold knife stabbing straight into Chase's heart, not only because Brook Lynn was destroying her own future, but also because she was destroying the lives of innocent people around her, especially Gio, a child who didn't know he was the victim of a cruel power play between selfish adults. And as Brook Lynn continued to cling to that lie, refusing to acknowledge the truth even as evidence piled up, a new storm began to rise from Sonny and Dante. Sonny, with his instinct to protect family flowing through his veins, could not stand idly by when his flesh and blood was deceived, when his true identity was stolen. Dante, as a father who didn't even know he had a child, as a man who had given his heart to Brook Lynn, was now lost in a profound chaos. He was angry, in pain, and lost in the undercurrents of betrayal and personal grief that he couldn't escape. Sonny, never one to forgive easily when his family was hurt, began to take action. Family gatherings that once were full of laughter were now heavy with silence and suspicion. Sonny wanted the truth to be revealed fully, wanted Brook Lynn to face the consequences of her actions, no matter who she was or what family ties had once bound them together. Meanwhile, Dante no longer recognized the woman he had once loved. Brook Lynn, with each rejection, each desperate resistance to the truth, was becoming a complete stranger. The pain rising in Dante was not only the pain of losing trust in Brook Lynn but also the pain of being deprived of the right to be a father all those years. His dreams of a small family, of seeing Gio grow up under his care, had now turned into sharp fragments that tore at his heart every day. The story was slipping into madness, spiraling out of control. Every day that passed, the tension between Brook Lynn, Sonny, and Dante grew. Conversations became sharper, colder, looks once full of love were now filled with doubt and anger. The entire town of Port Charles seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the moment when everything would completely collapse. When Brook Lynn would be forced to admit the truth or face total isolation from her family, from her community, from those she had once hoped would forgive her. Chase, though filled with excruciating pain, knew that he had no choice but to stand by the truth. He could no longer protect Brook Lynn, no longer turn a blind eye to what she had done. He knew that the only thing he could do now was stand firm, even as his heart bled, even as he knew that by exposing the truth, he would lose the most beautiful memories he had of the girl he once loved. And so, in a Port Charles gradually sinking into storms of rage and betrayal, Brook Lynn stood alone, facing the inevitable collapse. For once trust was lost, once the truth was twisted beyond repair, no matter how intense the love, it could not erase the deep scars that betrayal left behind. Brook Lynn and Lois, mother and daughter who had once been so close through all the ups and downs, were now facing an overwhelming pressure they had never experienced before in their lives. As the truth about Gio slowly came to light, as the layers of protection Brook Lynn had once so carefully constructed were blown away by the winds of doubt and anger, they found themselves at the center of the violent storm of betrayal raging through Port Charles. One of the biggest stories in their lives was unfolding. And it was placing Brook Lynn at the brink of an irreversible danger, losing everything, her rights, her position, her trust, and the love she had once possessed. The pressure from Sonny, Dante, Chase, Lulu, and even other members of the Quartermain family was now weighing heavily on Brook Lynn's shoulders like enormous boulders. No longer were there mild reproaches, no longer were there quiet, suspicious glances, now there were direct confrontations, sharp, knife-like stares, and uncompromising words demanding that Brook Lynn face the consequences of her ruthless choices. Each step Brook Lynn took now felt as though she was walking on ground about to crumble. Each time she spoke, the air around her thickened, suffocating under the pressure and the expectations growing further and further from reality. Brook Lynn knew very well that if she continued to stay silent, if she continued to cling to the rotting lies, she would lose Dante, lose Gio, lose the Quartermain family, and even lose the little trust she had fought so hard to earn from everyone after so many years of mistakes. Lois, the mother who had protected Brook Lynn with selfless love and sacrifice, also felt helpless in the face of the impending storm. She had once stood in front of the storms, protecting Brook Lynn from past gossip, but now, with the truth no longer able to be hidden, Lois knew that a mother's love couldn't patch the deep cracks between Brook Lynn and the world around her. All she could do was watch, with a broken heart, as her daughter lost one thing after another: respect, love, honor, and finally, herself. Each day that passed, Brook Lynn's isolation became more and more apparent. The Quartermain family, once full of disagreements but also deep bonds, now saw her as a stranger. Sonny, with his simmering anger, began to take action. Not only to protect Dante and Gio but also to punish Brook Lynn for manipulating family emotions for personal gain. Dante, the man who had once loved her with all his heart, now could not hide his immense disappointment and pain, making each look he cast at Brook Lynn feel like a deep wound. Port Charles, once her home, once a place where Brook Lynn was loved and forgiven for her youthful mistakes, now turned coldly away from her. Old friends whispered behind her back. Doors that were once wide open now closed in cold silence. Brook Lynn realized that she was not only losing everything she had but also losing the chance to be forgiven, to start anew, to rebuild from the wreckage. This change was unlike any she had experienced before. This was no small scandal that could be covered up with public apologies. No youthful mistake that could be forgotten with time. This was a deep wound, not only in Brook Lynn's heart but in the hearts of those she loved. And it would leave permanent scars that could never heal. As Brook Lynn sank deeper into despair, Lois had to make the hardest decision of her life: to continue protecting her daughter at all costs, or to urge her to face the truth to salvage what little remained from the wreckage of her life. But Lois knew, no matter which path she chose, no matter which path Brook Lynn took, they would never return to the peaceful days they once had. A darker chapter than ever before was opening in Brook Lynn's life, one where there would be no hand stretched out to welcome her. No forgiving embraces, only the coldness of raw truth and the price to be paid for her wrong decisions. And when this storm passed, Brook Lynn knew clearly, she could lose everything: her honor, her love, her family, and worse still, lose the very person she once was inside. In the moment when everything seemed about to collapse completely, Lois made a decision that only a true mother could make: to salvage what little remained of her daughter's wrecked life. Lois stepped forward to take full responsibility for switching the DNA test results of Gio. Before the astonished Quartermain family, before Sonny's simmering anger, before Dante's shattered gaze and Chase's quiet disappointment, Lois did not hesitate. She admitted that she had manipulated everything. That Brook Lynn was just a victim of a plan she had pushed forward out of the fear of losing her daughter and grandson forever. Lois, with a trembling but determined voice, apologized to each person one by one. She admitted her wrongdoings, acknowledging that she had acted out of blind love, that she had placed the futures of Brook Lynn and Gio at risk just to protect what she thought was best. These words, though spoken from a deep place of love, could not extinguish the emotional storm raging in the heavy room. Cold faces, eyes filled with disappointment, unbridgeable gaps, all weighed heavily on Lois like an unappealable sentence. Knowing her presence would only make things worse, Lois decided to leave Port Charles. No complaints, no excuses, just quietly packing her things and preparing to leave, so that Brook Lynn could face the consequences of what she had caused, and so she could have a chance, even if it was a slim one, to start anew without her mother's shadow looming over her. But even as Lois took full responsibility, Brook Lynn could not escape the harshest punishment: complete isolation from those she had once loved. Dante, the man she had once thought would always be by her side, now looked at her with only cold indifference. Chase, who had once been a friend and emotional support, now held only bitter disappointment. Sonny, with all his love for family, could no longer forgive her betrayal. Port Charles, the place that had once echoed with Brook Lynn's laughter, where she had been surrounded by warmth and forgiveness for her youthful mistakes, now coldly turned its back on her. No more phone calls, no more hugs, no more words of encouragement. Only heavy silence and avoiding gazes remained. Brook Lynn walked through familiar streets, feeling every whispered look behind her, every bit of gossip like cold knives stabbing into her chest. Each day passed in solitude, and Brook Lynn felt more than ever the price she had to pay for her wrong choices. She had not only lost Dante, not only lost the Quartermain family, but had also lost herself, the girl who had once been proud, full of life, and had dared to dream and fight for love. Now, Brook Lynn was left alone with heavy memories and shattered dreams, eating away at her every day in endless loneliness. And though Lois had sacrificed everything to protect her, Brook Lynn knew that some mistakes could never be washed away by any apology or sacrifice. Some wounds would never heal, some gaps would never be filled. Though she knew her mother had left because of love, though she knew every action Lois took came from boundless maternal love, Brook Lynn could not stop feeling that she was the sole sinner in the tragedy she had created herself. A new chapter had begun in Brook Lynn's life, the chapter of isolation, of atonement, of long, cold days with no one waiting for her, no one beside her. And in that heavy silence, Brook Lynn had to find her way to face herself, to learn how to live with the scars she had inflicted on herself and on those she loved.